Well, very good. Well, again, thanks to everyone for your patience. This virtual experience is not how we planned this conference. I think like most of us, frankly, I've missed getting together, swapping lives with friends over cold, frosty beverages. And I'm a sap and I miss hugs and human contact. And we really struggled, as an association, how to proceed given COVID and travel restrictions. And just want to say thanks to everyone that helped filled out our member survey to kind of figure out, it really did assist us in trying to understand the best way to proceed. And, even with all these crazy technical issues, I'm so happy that HUVA, the staff that's been here, they've been incredibly professional partners, for which I'm just completely stoked with them. As we're coming out, this is almost like a award show, just thank the planning committee. There's a group of folks, Morgan alluded to them, they're this dream team that associated, they put hours upon hours upon hours into making this a really good experience for you. And we certainly, there's no way we could have done this without, our program chair, Morgan Varner, Annie Oxerart, who's going to sleep for about 2.5 months afterwards, and also Mark Kaib, who also we spent hours and hours and hours meeting outside all these other ones. So, but through this entire experience, I found that I became excited about how we as a community of fire ecologists and we as a profession, we rallied together. And this conference has exceeded my expectations in terms of not only numbers, but just the content and the production, almost the seamless way in which we've been working. And for my part, I found I was really excited and frankly, blown away to watch the new science and especially the technologies that are coming out. And not to date myself, but for a guy that had never even had access to a computer until I started working on my master's degree, I was absolutely floored about these new technologies. A lot of it is being developed by the students that have been on here, and just, so encouraged just to see how many students that we've had involved in the conference. Everything from getting together with the Student Association for Fire Ecology for trivia to being in with poster sessions and oral presentations. It was just really exciting to see the quality of people that we have coming up in our profession. And I was really excited also by the number of international participants that we had. And I'll say it was a primary goal of mine when I took over the presidency 4 years ago to broaden our membership. And you think that we started out as just a small group of people 20 years ago in California. They're just looking for a community, something that we could talk about. And it's grown to what we've seen today, that we have folks on every single continent minus Antarctica. I was really excited by the international participant, and we're probably going to have, being able to pivot to more of a hybrid conference in the future to aid our international participation. And on that, I want to bring up an upcoming event for next year. If we want to put up that slide about our Florence conference, and just let you know that over 3 years ago, Karen Riley and I sat down in Missoula, Montana with the Pal Costa Foundation, President Mark Castano and Nuria Pratt to discuss partnering for our first conference outside the USA for our association. And, a tremendous amount of work happened both with US partners and European partners to put on this in Florence, Italy. And unfortunately, both in 20 and in 21, we've had to delay this conference. But we're coming back, baby. 2022, we have got it back on the book. So we really hope that we're going to see everyone that's going out. I did kind of want to leave you with just some final thoughts. I'm leaving the board after 15 years serving on the association board, including the last 4 years of president. And just let you know that I am incredibly encouraged by the unbelievably bright, hardworking people that are laboring on your benefit. I mean, you would be very, very proud of your board of directors that have been working tirelessly behind the scenes, things you don't see. And just know that, we are exploring ways to better enable members to be actively engaged in AFE. We need you to be a part of committees. We need new folks to be on the board. We need folks hosting field tours, trivia nights, webinars, these things for the association. And so we're actively looking at that. And so on that note, we're going to be initiating a new strategic planning that's going to be starting out, that's really going to guide us for the next 5 to 10 years to better come up with what we hope and expect to be, for the future, for our profession, for our colleagues that are here. And I'm really excited this process is going to be guided by our incoming president, Paul Hessburg. Paul serves as a research landscape ecologist with U.S. Forest Service, the Pacific Northwest Research Station. And just to let you know, as incoming president, he's coming in, I think you're going to be floored. Paul is a consummate professional. He has admirably served before on the AFE board, but had to step away for personal reasons. And for the Gen Xers that are in the crowd, just know that you'll get this reference. Paul, when he was on the board previously, was my own personal E.F. Hutton, in that when Paul Hessburg speaks, people listen. And I find Paul to be incredibly visionary. He's focused and unbelievably dedicated. And most importantly, I'm just happy to be able to call Paul, think on him as a friend. And so with that, I introduce to you your incoming AFE president, Paul Hessburg, will show a portion of his hopes, dreams, and visions for AFE in the coming years. So Paul, take it away.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks to the program committee for this brief opportunity to greet you all. We've all benefited from years-long efforts to create and host this 9th Congress, and I begin by acknowledging those efforts. In ordinary times, hosting an international Congress it's no mean feat, and in the years of COVID and Zoom, it's all the more difficult. I'm also grateful for the exceptional efforts of our Congress Chair, Morgan Varner, and his capable program committee. They've been incredibly flexible, adaptable, and calm during this time of uncertainty. This week, we've benefited from new and groundbreaking science and practice presented in topical plenary talks, posters, symposia, fire circles, workshops, and concurrent oral sessions, and always 2 short Q&A sessions. No one should walk away lacking big ideas to ponder or new colleagues to network with. Let's keep the discussions going. We are honoring distinguished scientists, practitioners, and leaders, folks who've grown the frontiers of knowledge and practice, who've mentored and challenged us. We've renewed our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we're commingling knowledge and practice with our Indigenous partners to co-produce new knowledge and new practices. These things will continue on my watch. As in every age, we're living on the frontier of new knowledge and practice, and it's exciting to be in this place at this time. I'm honored to rejoin the board of AFE and to be its next president. As Chris mentioned, I had the privilege of serving in the decade prior, both as board member and AFE vice president. I stepped down after 5 years to write and try new things, and for some personal reasons. We are doing important work that affects people, ecosystems, and our own way of life, and we have important stories to tell. I urge each of us to avoid having our best stories simply stuck between the pages of journals. We can have impact on science and society. These were some of the new things I was trying out over the last 5 years. Our board, as Chris mentioned, is busy planning for the future. And one of my goals is going to be to work with your board to chart the next 5 years. In March, we'll engage in strategic and financial planning to grow an even more nimble organization, one that can withstand COVID and other uncertainties that arise. With gratitude to Chris Dicus and his years of service and the help of your distinguished board, I hope to carry on the good work of AFE and bolster its influence through a continued progression of timely and relevant international congresses, regional conferences, broadened international membership and involvement, and continued growth and impact of our journal. One of our unsung heroes, Bob Keene, even in retirement, continues to forge a strong path forward for our flagship journal, Fire Ecology. I appreciate your work, Bob, and that of our associate editors, and your drive to continuously improve the journal's impact. I also appreciate your agreement, Bob, to stay on during my presidency. Bob works tirelessly behind the scenes and, like his predecessors, never fails to get our best work into Fire Ecology. Thanks for the chance, Chris, and program committee to greet you all and for the honor of serving again over the coming years.
All right, so now we're going to pivot into just really quick some awards. As Morgan has said, we are kind of he's a sucker for awards, and people work tirelessly behind the scenes so often and are not acknowledged, and we're able to do that. I do want to award, it's interesting what the student posters went through. We did have a group, a committee that went through and examined each one of the posters that were available and kind of took a special look at the student posters as these folks are kind of coming up. A couple of you here know that I got to go through and meet you and just let you know that I think that you're just stellar people, and I'm really looking forward to see your career. But we had Kipling Clemus, Mitchell Lazars, and Jenna Morris. All three of you scored absolute perfect scores by our committee that was looking through that, to try and decide on this. And know that we have some parting gifts for you. So be on the lookout for that because of your excellence in what you're doing, not only in the way that the research that's having a profound impact on, our group of folks are working in this field, but just the way that you presented it. So just well done, well done, well done. And I think that we might have some potential future board members here, so keep up the great work that's going on. I also mentioned that we had certification was something that we've got. And we had several folks that had applied for certification. And if we will go ahead and switch to the next slide, come down, show the folks that were certified in this last year. We had people that were certified just at the basic fire ecologist and fire technician thing. We had folks that were our new fuel scientists. We had folks that, senior fire ecologists, senior fire managers. I've seen some friends from a long time I was here, and I'm just really excited to see you a part of that. And we also started working through a new program with our recertification. So Dan Lavelle and Philip Dye both decided, I want to show that I have remained current in there. And so these are both just top-notch folks, and I'm just really happy to see that you were recertified. So if you're not certified at this point, on the AFE webpage, there is a way that you can almost self-select to see, what certifications that you could be potentially applicable for. And so this is something that kind of sets you apart, just kind of showing that you have met the very high standards for AFE, for meeting from an ecologist or manager position at the different levels. So I highly encourage you to look into being certified. It's a really great thing to kind of set yourself apart again and demonstrate that you've got the street cred in order to be doing the things that we're hoping to accomplish as a profession. Well, we're going to pivot now into our awards, our Lifetime Achievement Awards. And the first one we're going to take a look at is the Biswell Award, the Lifetime Achievement Award. And this is going to be started off with another long-term fire ecologist, someone that has previously won the Biswell Award. Just a quick video from Jim Agee, previously at the University of Washington.
Good afternoon to all of you. The Biswell Award is a Lifetime Achievement Award for individuals working primarily in ecosystems of the Western United States or similar ecosystems internationally. It is named after Harold Biswell, a longtime faculty member at the University of California at Berkeley. Harold was a student of John Weaver, a noted grassland ecologist at the University of Nebraska. His first professional posting was as a range ecologist with the Southern Research Station of the Forest Service in Macon, Georgia. And it was there he first experienced the use of fire as a useful forest management tool. He soon transferred to the Pacific Southwest Research Station in Fresno, California, again as a range ecologist, and soon transferred to the University of California on the forestry faculty, again as a range ecologist. His work in grassland burning and shrubland burning was relatively non-controversial, but he soon graduated from that kind of burning to burning in the dry forests of California, which was very controversial. His job as a professor was threatened. He was labeled with nicknames like Harry the Torch and Burn 'em Up Biswell, but he kept his head high. He weathered the criticism and almost single-handedly bent the old fire suppression culture in California from the early 1950s on. The logic of his message attracted many of us to become interested in fire science as a career. His importance as a mentor is illustrated by the fact that 3 of his former students, Jan van Wagtendonk, Ron Wakamoto, and me, have been recipients of the Biswell Award. As Harold would have said, "Good golly, Jim." When he retired, he was awarded the Berkeley Citation, a rare award given to individuals whose contributions to the university go beyond the call of duty and whose achievements exceed the standards of excellence in their fields. It is fitting that the Association for Fire Ecology Lifetime Achievement Award is named for Harold Biswell. Thank you.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean Parks, who is going to introduce this year's Biswell Award winner. And I am absolutely excited for this winner. Top-notch person that Sean is going to talk about now.
I'm Sean Parks. I work for the Aldo Leopold Wilderness Research Institute, and I've been asked to introduce the Biswell Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. I've also asked to be brief, and it's also a little strange talking to a computer screen, so I brought some sound effects a little sound machine for my kids, so I'm going to hopefully utilize this and press the correct buttons. But anyway, let's get on here with it. I'm really proud and I'm honored to announce the recipient of this award, and it's drum roll, please. Dr. Carol Miller is the recipient of this award. Carol has been my mentor, colleague, and friend and supervisor since 2008. Let's see, I was asked to be brief. So I don't have time to list all of the significant contributions to fire ecology and management that Carol has made, but perhaps probably the 2 most significant, at least in my mind, that stand out are her pioneering research in the development of landscape fire ecology and her contributions to wilderness fire management, or more broadly, her research that articulates the benefits of allowing fires to burn for resource benefit, also called wildland fire use or managed fire. So Carol is widely known for her foundational contributions to the field of landscape ecology. Early on in her career, she published several high-profile articles on the topic. In 2008, she was actually awarded by the International Association for Landscape Ecology for the best paper published in the journal Landscape Ecology on the landscape ecology of fire. And then this probably culminated in 2011 when she co-edited and published this book with Don McKenzie and Don Falk called The Landscape Ecology of Fire. So honestly, this is a great book and one of the few books I've actually read from cover to cover, except for like recreational books. So no, seriously, this is a great book. And she was awarded, she got an award for this book as well. So great work in the field of landscape fire ecology. In terms of wilderness fire management, well, she's done a lot. She's written a review paper on the topic. She's co-organized several wilderness fire management workshops on the periphery of the Bob Marshall Wilderness to get managers involved in knowing about the science. She's developed this really cool retrospective fire modeling framework to basically quantify the hidden consequences of fire suppression. And this work has really framed my thinking personally about wilderness as a natural laboratory to test theories on landscape fire ecology. So this work has been very influential on me. And so let's talk about that, because part of the Biswell Award is about how she's inspired and mentored fire ecologists over the years. And I think, there's been a lot of us, but I feel particularly influenced by Carol. She's had a great impact on me, positive impact. She's mentored me up through the career ladder from research scientist to from an analyst to a research scientist. including advising me through my PhD program. There's several others I could name. I'll give a shout out to Dr. Andrew Larson, who is also inspired by Carol Miller. He actually wrote the nomination for this award. So that shows how inspiring Carol has been to a lot of us in the fire ecology world. So I'll wrap this up. Carol is extremely deserving of this award. I'm really proud of her. I feel lucky that our lives crossed and became entwined in 2008. She's been a great mentor, friend, collaborator over the last 10 years, and the friendship continues as she enjoys retirement. So please put your hands together and join me in congratulating Dr. Miller.
Hello, AFE. Well, thank you. This award is quite a surprise, and I'm not going to lie, it's kind of weird being recognized for your so-called lifetime achievements, but thank you. And gives me an opportunity to reflect back. And when I do, what I remember are the smart, creative, and passionate colleagues that I worked with over the years. And I think that this award says more about them than it does about me. Those of you that know me know that I always relied heavily upon collaboration in everything that I did. And most of those collaborations were really dependent on the time that I spent with people at conferences, the people that I met there, the ideas that I heard about there. Some really fruitful long-term collaborations started with an AFE conference. So I really hope that you all are having a good conference and that you're figuring out how to take advantage of this virtual environment to make those new connections and learn about new ideas, and hopefully having like those light bulbs of your own go off. And I don't know how soon you'll be able to gather in person again as a large group, but I hope it's soon, and I hope you hang in there until you do, because, you know, feeding off of each other's ideas in the moment can be just so fun, and that's one of the great parts about this work. You know, for better or for worse, the incredibly rapid change that we're seeing in our ecological systems right now, it's producing a ton of information that needs to be processed into new knowledge. And so that's a great opportunity. And your job as professional scientists to combine that new knowledge with the existing knowledge that's out there in figuring out what it all means and then communicating it so that others understand it. I'm gonna bet that collaboration's gonna be key for you being successful in doing that. So I really hope that you can figure out how to keep doing that through the conference environment and through the virtual environment. Now, I retired several months ago, last spring at the end of April. And one of the reasons I did was that I saw so much talent and skill in the fire ecology community. And it really seemed to me like the best thing that I could do was to step aside and get out of your way. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to let you get back to it. Thank you to the association for this incredible recognition. You really do humble and you honor me with it. And thanks to my collaborators over the last 20 or so years, it was a lot of fun. And to each and every one of you, I wish you the best of luck. And what you're doing is really important, and I hope that you remember that. So thanks, and you guys have a good conference.
Congratulations to Carol. If you've never met her, she's just a wonderful woman. And as they say, where I grew up in the southeastern United States, she's good people. So speaking of good people, I want to introduce now our editor of our journal, Fire Ecology. That would be coming on Bob Keene, as well as who else we have? Sharon Hood coming up for the journal. Going to have a couple of awards. We got some good people working for there. So Bob, please go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bob Keene. I am the fourth editor, managing editor of the journal Fire Ecology. And my big question to you are, why aren't you publishing in this incredible journal? We need you. Please publish. Today, I'd like to celebrate one person's career that they've had at Fire Ecology. I estimate that Lori Burke has worked on over 1,000 papers over the last year, and she has done a wonderful job. I bet I did a rough count, and I'm guessing that she worked with over 1,200 different authors with all the papers that she did. And her work was tireless, and she always had the journal in mind. Unfortunately, she decided in June to go ahead and retire, and we miss her greatly. So today we'd like to give an Editor Service Award to Lori Burke, our copy editor, and the one single person that kept the journal together through all of the vagaries of each of the new managing editors that came in and so on. So Lori, let me celebrate your 20 plus years in your career with Fire Ecology and tell you that we really miss you, and we really hope that you have a wonderful retirement. Now, I say that with tongue in cheek because Lori, like she always does, has volunteered to help out with editing anybody's paper before you submit it. And she will accept money, but she will also, she mentions, do it for free if you don't have the money. And this goes especially to our people who have English as a second language. So Lori is still part of the journal, and we'd like to thank her. Thanks you so much, Lori. With that, I give it over to Sharon, I think.
Hi, my name's Sharon Hood, and I'm the chair of the Publications Committee for Association for Fire Ecology. And as you just heard from Bob, Fire Ecology is the scientific journal of AFE. And that journal could not happen without the dedicated work of our editorial board, who volunteers their time gathering reviews and reviewing papers themselves, and then making those decisions about which papers get published in the journal. So this year, we would like to recognize our one particular associate editor for his outstanding work. I'd like to recognize Jeff Kane. I think we have a picture of Jeff. And then, so Jeff has been on the editorial board since 2009. Bob notes that he doesn't think he's ever turned down an assignment when Bob has asked him to manage a manuscript, and always does an outstanding job soliciting reviews of high quality in a timely manner and making really professional decisions. So Jeff is an associate professor at Humboldt State, highly published in his own right with over 50 journal articles. He's chair of the Northern California Prescribed Fire Council and an active member in the Association for Fire Ecology, being member on the education committee and the editorial board. So with that, please help me recognize Jeff Kane for his outstanding work and service to AFE. I think Jeff is on if you want to share your screen. You're muted, Jeff.
Of course.
Okay.
Thank you, Sharon. This is I'm honored, and I love this journal, and it's been really great being able to contribute to the association and to Fire Ecology. Thank you so much. I'm going to keep it short, and I look forward to hopefully being in this role for a long time to come. So thanks.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Jeff.
I'm Karen Riley, and it's my honor today to present a service award to our outgoing president, Chris Dicus. And as I noted in the opening plenary, I have served on the AFE board since approximately 2000 BC. And then Chris followed on by noting that he's been on the board since about 2100 BC. But Annie looked up the real number for us, and it is 2007, as Chris said a moment ago. So we were exaggerating a little bit, but not much. Before becoming president, Chris served as the chair of the governance committee, and the board always knew that we could count on him. If we had any trivia questions about the bylaws, Chris would generally know off the top of his head. I can also tell you from having witnessed it firsthand that if you're lucky enough to accompany Chris to an evening of karaoke, he may regale you with a damn good version of Black Crow's Hard to Handle. And it was at a karaoke evening in Portland that I can see Chris remembers from his face that I first witnessed Chris's ability to keep cool in awkward situations when some members of the audience started to get, shall we say, overly fond, but Chris didn't miss a single beat. Chris took on the role of president 4 years ago when AFE was going through some difficult transitions. And Bob Keene offered these words, remembering his presidency: "I don't know if anyone is more dedicated to the advancement of AFE than Chris Dicus. His strong leadership was the rock the organization needed during its time of struggle. Thanks, Chris, for being a great captain of the Fire Ecology cruise ship." Chris is currently serving on the mentoring committee, and we certainly hope he'll continue to do so even after quote unquote retirement. My most enduring memory of the Chris Dicus presidency may be the way that Chris started each board meeting by asking who had good news to share. Lots of board members commented this meant a lot to them. For example, Kurt Kipfmuller shared, "One thing I really appreciate about Chris and his leadership on the board has been his consistent push towards sharing good news before each of our board meetings. I think that signifies someone that has a great deal of empathy and compassion. It's a small but important and much appreciated action." Jessica Miesel also offered her appreciation for Chris's good humor. "Chris always shows up with a smile even when situations are challenging, always has a positive word and willing to celebrate wins with others. Beginning with good news is something he introduced to board meetings during his term as president, and it helped me feel like I got to know other board members better by hearing about the things that were important to them and or they were celebrating professionally as well as in their personal or family lives." Board member Francisco Sejo shared, "Thanks, Chris, for being such an awesome leader, always looking for it and finding the silver lining." That good news set the tone for each and every board meeting, and Chris's smiling face guided us through many difficult decisions, including the recent one to move this platform entirely to virtual. Chris's skill as a moderator meant these discussions proceeded at a pace that meant everyone could share their thoughts and have them heard. And I found that many of these discussions often ended up as more than the sum of their parts, as everyone had time to speak and was thoughtfully heard. In my role as vice president, now retired, Chris and I had some thoughtful discussions about what diversity and inclusivity really mean, including that our diverse membership ranges from scientists to managers, and that true inclusivity means listening to opinions that might currently be unpopular and out of vogue. Board member Zach Prusak offered the following words: "Chris always has the diverse fire community first and foremost in his mind in his tenure with AFE, and he led the organization through ups and downs of many COVID-driven uncertainties recently with his combination of humor and calm determination. His leadership will be missed." Diego Perez Salacrup, currently AFE's treasurer, thanks Chris for, quote, "all his hard work and making me feel welcome to the board from day one." Chris, I sure wish I could hand you this award in person, but here's to 4 years of your thoughtful and good humored guidance. We will miss you and look for a special gift coming in the mail soon. And I'll hand the mic back to Morgan, I guess, unless Chris, were you gonna say something?
I have to watch myself. Everyone that knows me knows that I'm a little emotional by nature, and my voice will end up cracking. So, wow, just thank you to everyone that the kind words, and what a long, strange trip it's been. And just, I don't know, I'll let you go and turn it back over just for time to Morgan. But thank you for the chance to know everyone, to work with you, to laugh with you, to cry with you. It's been an amazing experience.
We've been through this before. I can't take the awards. I get too emotional, but once again, I'm following the awards. That was great. It was really great. We're going to switch gears and get to our closing keynotes, and I'll introduce both, and I hope you'll be as excited about who we invited as I was in the program committee. Our first keynote will be Dr. Paulo Fernandes. He's affiliated with the University of Trás-os-Montes and Alto Douro in Portugal, where he holds an associate professor position. Many of you know Dr. Fernandes's many scientific contributions, but it's been really focused on the fundamental behavior and ecology of wildland fire, always from an applied perspective, which has been really refreshing. He really focuses on fuel characterization, field-based assessment, and modeling of fire effects and fuel characteristics. And his work has been globally leading in the effects of prescribed fire and its effectiveness. He serves on the board of multiple journals, and it's a real pleasure for all of us to have Dr. Fernandes. Take it away, Paulo.
Thank you, Morgan. First of all, I thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here today. Okay, I think you are seeing my screen now. So my talk is about the changing role of fire in Southern European landscapes. I will start by providing some context, both about the Mediterranean region of Europe in general, historical context for land and fire management. And then I will mostly focus on prescribed burning in Southern Europe, both from the research and development perspective and its current utilization. And then, because this is really important here, the role or the potential role of prescribed burning in mitigating wildfire effects. And finally, and I hopefully expect then that you will understand it then, why we should be change in the future, change our direction in terms of fire management. So we are under a Mediterranean climate, dry and warm summers, wet winters. Our landscapes are covered with flammable vegetation, especially sclerophyllous shrublands, evergreen oak woodlands, pine forests of different kinds, both thick-barked species or crown fire species. Our shrublands in particular, fire behavior is really extreme under mild fire weather, as you see in these examples. So these shrubland had burned for 33 years, and it just needed 7 hours after rainfall to burn like this. We also have deciduous forests, oak forests. They are not so relevant given the Mediterranean climate, and of course, plantation forestry can be important, including eucalypts, for example, from imported from Australia. Of course, like elsewhere, we have fire problems at the wildland-urban interface, which in Europe is more of a rural-urban interface. So that's where most ignition sources are, where values at risk in terms of human life and property are as well. Our landscapes are usually described as cultural landscapes, so they reflect a long and old history of disturbance, both in terms of fire from natural caused fires and human intervention. And so our landscapes have changed a lot. Here I give you, there are many studies with these paleoecology studies in Europe. This is one example. So in central Portugal, we have regular fire since about 14,000 years ago, and vegetation has changed accordingly. So our landscapes used to be like these. You see some examples. So open with very sparse forests, dominated by shrubs, by grass. So reflecting all these disturbances, not just fire, but intense exploitation of wood, grazing, and so on. But all this changed in the 20th century, by the essentially by mid-century. So we had these open landscapes with frequent fire, or with much more extensive farmland than nowadays, also with much more grazing and browsing animals. There were huge afforestation programs, especially with pines. Farming has decreased. Fire suppression has established since the 1950s, 1960s. Forest services in these Southern Europe countries have declined, so forest management has declined. And more recently, nature conservation is more important, which can have pervasive effect from the point of view of fire management. So fuels have accumulated both at landscape level or at stand level, and then establishing continuity between patches. And so burned area increased a lot during the 1970s, 1980s, and subsequently decreased because of fire suppression. But now we are having these extreme fires, which were unknown in previous decades. In terms of fire suppression, it has been mostly focused in controlling ignition, so reducing the number of fires and suppressing fires. You see, in general, the area burn has decreased by 2/3 in these Southern Europe countries. And we notice, this is from satellite imagery, that the smallest fires are increasingly smaller, but the largest fires, here it's the 95th percentile, are increasingly larger. And so the major concern are these extreme wildfire events, nowadays called megafires, which essentially affect the western and the eastern ends of the Mediterranean. So in the western, like Portugal, because the climate here is more humid, so net primary productivity is higher. And on the other side, as it was quite clear this past summer, fire danger in terms of fire weather, it's also worse than here. So we get all these increasingly quite large fires that make the news essentially when they hit wildland-urban interfaces. And here you see the 5 most deadly wildfire events in modern times. So twice in Greece, twice in Portugal in the same year, and last year in Algeria. So all these events caused killed a minimum of 50 people. So between 50, 120 people each. So prescribed burning in Southern Europe initially appeared with the major objective was to use fire for reducing fuels. And so a bit like you see here, the use of fire is mostly viewed as a tamed fire that will accomplish some utilitarian purpose. And this new use of fire was meant to replace, or not meant, but had the effect of replacing traditional ecological knowledge. And it was, since the beginning, driven by the work and enthusiasm of a few pioneers since the 1960s. We can say it was born of some exchanges between Portugal, France, Spain, and people from the US, most notably Edwin Komarek. The development was very much a synergy between people in the academy and the forest services, and it followed the development of fire ecology in Europe. So we can distinguish these scientific research phases. First, people wanted to make prescribed burning a legitimate practice, so they were focused on ecological effects, worked on generic burn prescriptions. There was an important phase with big European cooperative projects, mostly focused in prescribed burning effects. And later, people mostly worked to develop tools to assist the planning and decision support process. So in terms of decision making, people work with established burn intervals and burn windows, use the Canadian Fire Weather Index system for fire danger rating, sometimes use US fire modeling tools like the AFE Plus or Flame Map. And we built or developed some burn guides and their software equivalents based on field experimentation on burning that are used to develop site-specific conditions for specific objectives, like these two you see here, pyropinos for pine stands and fire globulus for eucalypt plantations. Of course, there's still much to do, especially in terms of fuel dynamics, hazard reduction, effectiveness, issues related with carbon, long-term monitoring and the effects of a prescribed fire regime, because most studies were focused on individual events, not on the cumulative effect of repeated burning. And so there's much to do about biodiversity or the likelihood of invasion by alien species, alien plants, and of course, policy and socioeconomic issues. In terms of utilization, it's restricted to the Western countries. So essentially France, Portugal, and Spain. Italy, it's always somewhat developing, but slowly, and the burn treated area is very low. It's mostly used to reduce fuels to manage rangelands and pastures. Also some nature conservation purposes in a few places. And it's mostly in open vegetation types, so shrubland, grassland. When it's in forest, it's mostly in pine forest. These burn operations are small scale, and low in complexities because of scarcity of people and equipment. And so the area treated is low, the burn plots are small. You can see here these distributions. So the dominating burn class, it's about between 1 and 4 hectares. This is for Portugal and Catalonia, Spain. And the maximum size of our burns does not exceed 200 hectares. An interesting characteristic is that it's highly cooperative. And this is both within a given country or region and also between countries. So lots of exchanges. We had already 2 or 3 European versions or 2 or 3 European editions of tracks in Portugal and Spain. This is a region in southern France, in the Eastern Pyrenees. I present it as probably the best example of landscape level use of prescribed burning. So you can see in the map, they really have this mosaic that was created by prescribed fire. The objectives are mostly managing habitats for cattle or horses or wild herbivores and some protected species like birds of prey or bears. In terms of technological development, so traditional burning in the region is characterized by, we can call it micro burning, unbounded burning. And so prescribed burning is based here on burn thresholds, burn intervals, and this is mostly controlled burning. So it's more, the emphasis is more on controlling the burn, so controlling the intensity and making sure it does not escape. And so actual prescribed burning more based in sophisticated or more site-specific burn windows is less common, and so the emphasis on effects is less common, and also post-burn assessment it's not a big thing here. So this reflects the early state of development of prescribed burning here. Regarding the wildfire mitigation potential, there are some studies about fuel dynamics, so especially in pine forest and in shrubland. Here you see some examples how fuels accumulate until more or less steady state, and this of course helps planning subsequent operations. And we can learn in terms of rationale for burning from the point of view of managing fuels. We have learned from these pastoral traditional burning, like you see here in these landscapes, that create these fine-grained mosaics that constrain the spread of large fires, and sometimes even under extreme conditions, like you see some examples here. And so there were some studies focused on these, where we tried to infer from interactions between previous fires and subsequent fires on the landscape, looking at wildfire as a full treatment. So we learned that increasingly larger wildfires are, as expected, increasingly less constrained by recently burned areas because of more extreme conditions under which they burn, but at the same time they select older vegetation, and they also select forest rather than shrubland in the most extreme years. But these large fires decrease in size when they ran into areas that burned less than 9 years ago, and especially less than 6 years ago. And if we look at biodiversity, which here is described as the spatial patterns of fire recurrence, these explain 41% of the variation of large fires in Portugal. And so these kind of landscapes, like you see here with frequent fire and somewhat intricate full mosaics, can really control these large fires and buffer the effects of extreme fire weather. You see these in this graph, where this is the initial spread index of the Canadian FWI system. And so when edge density of fire recurrence is high, fire size does not respond to these windy and dry conditions for fire propagation. We can also learn from these interactions in pine forests. Pine forests subject to sequences of fires, so that burn. These pine forests are relatively new or recent, so they burned since the 1970s, but still we can find these fire scars and find out that the severity of these fires in terms of canopy kill height decreases when the fire return interval is low. So about 4 years, less than 4 years since the last wildfire. We also did some fire behavior experimentation, and these gave good information for pine forests. So prescribed burning in these situations, in terms of fire behavior characteristics, especially flame length, fire line intensity, we can say the treatment lasts for around 10 years. In terms of burn severity, in this case, we studied crown scorch. It lasts between 3 and 8 years, depending on fire weather. So milder weather, it lasts 8 years. and under more severe conditions, more typical conditions of summer, just 3 years. And here you see an example from Italy of these mitigating effects. But the major concern so far here is about burned area by wildfire and the individual size of large wildfires. So that's really important for managers and politicians here, not so much fire severity. So people really want to know if prescribed burning and other full treatments decrease the size of wildfires. And we can examine these by trying to see what happens when wildfires run into previously treated areas, like you see in this example last year, and then try to estimate the leverage of prescribed burning. So what is the proportional decrease in wildfire burned area per each hectare of treatment? But this reduction depends, of course, on the intersection, so on the likelihood of encounters between wildfires and treated areas, and depends on the survival of a treated area after being intersected. By survival, I mean if it burns a lot or completely or not. And so differently from other countries, including the US, our encounters are quite likely. So 42% of the treated units were encountered by a wildfire, and this happened soon. So the maximum, the peak of this likelihood of encounter was 2 years after treatment, which is good because fuels are still accumulating. Unfortunately, most of these encounters result in no survival. I mean, the entire treated plot burns. Most are intersected by large wildfires, so more extreme weather. Larger treatments, as expected, survive more, but even in those cases, wildfire characteristics are quite important. For example, if it's the head fire instead of the flank or the rear of the wildfire, the survival is lowest. And somewhat surprisingly, the unburned fraction of these treated plots it does not seem in general affected by time since treatment. In terms of leverage, we are still working with these, but it's very low. So we have to treat 10 hectares to reduce wildfire size by 1 hectare. This is one order of magnitude below what happens with wildfire encounters in Portugal. So, and how can we explain this? In part, it comes from full dynamics. So our vegetation types are fire adapted, they resprout or plants germinate. This combines with high net primary productivity. Sometimes you observe what it's in this photograph. So repetition of frequent fire creates more grass. So woody full types become more grassy, and so they will burn sooner. But most of all, it's a result of the type of burning we do in Europe. So treatment units are small, are dispersed on the landscape. Perhaps planning of the location could be better. The treatment effort is quite low, so about 0.5% of the landscape per year. And in terms of wildfire suppression efforts, we find that often they don't take advantage of these areas to fight the fire. So the obvious conclusion is the need to scale up the activity, but also to improve fire management planning and operations in general. Because I don't think we will ever be able to treat large fractions of the landscape like in North America or Australia. in the future, I believe we should be giving more attention to the role that unplanned fire can have. And depending on the newer land management objectives, the ecological role of fire, and what is threatened by a wildfire, we should start thinking about these and trying to integrate unplanned fire, so wildfire, in this process. So what is nowadays proscribed, try to unproscribe it. I'm not sure this is a word. And we really see that there's lots of burning activity of this type. For example, autumn-winter fires in the Iberian Peninsula and in France. Most of these fires are pastoral burning. Some of them are prescribed burning. And it really takes knowledge to carry out these burns. This is a photo I took from my house, looking at the nearby mountains, and so you can see this fire that was lit during the night. Temperature was negative, so it takes expertise to get out of bed in the middle of the night to know that this ignition will work and will spread under these conditions. So this is still, this shows a survival of a traditional fire culture, so traditional ecological knowledge in terms of using fire. Very often these burns are under very marginal spread conditions, so they are self-limiting, create the patch mosaics I have mentioned before. And local people, interestingly, call these shepherding the fire. So in these landscapes, you notice that this is just 1 kilometer, and see all these mosaic of fire frequency or fire recurrence. And this is incomplete because older satellite imagery was unable to identify the smallest fires. This map is interesting because it reflects somehow a new approach by the fire management agencies. So you can see, this is in Portugal, you can see wildfires. This is data from last year. And you can see in yellow wildfires that were not recorded. So they are not in the list, in the official list of wildfires. And this means there was no fire suppression on these fires. So these mostly reflect some tolerance of fire management agencies towards these traditional burning, this pastoral burning in the landscape. Then you see prescribed fire, and then you see pastoral burning assisted by fire management agencies, so burns that are carried out to serve the interests of local people. And this started in France, in the Pyrenees, since the 1980s. So here they revived best practice traditional fire use, but within a regulated framework. So they included local people in the decision-making process, supported by fire managers or fire management agencies. But nowadays they kind of abandoned. And so local people just burn on their own. They don't need any more this support. In Portugal and Spain, we are starting with similar initiatives, but they mostly work on a demand basis. So people express their interest in having their land burned for some purpose, and then the agencies go there and do the fires, carry out the fires. Portugal now has a legislation that considers that wildfires and planned fires can be monitored for resource benefits. This is in the law, but not really yet being practiced, because people are afraid of that bad decisions may occur. So, and the law calls these fires management fires. So to conclude, Prescribed burning development in Europe is difficult because there are many obstacles. So cultural, institutional, and even practical. The obstacles we can find in many other places in the world, but we still have this fire management policy, which is mostly centered on suppression, avoiding fire, not much investment in full treatments. Fire is seen mostly as an emergency that must be dealt with. And so under this framework, it's not easy to advance. Of course, in the future, I expect we will be expanding prescribed fire more, but most of all, we will be looking at fire as an ecological process, not just as a utilitarian tool. And so the challenge for Southern Europe is to live with fire in a flammable landscape, and this is similar to other regions of the world. So people in safety, where we can benefit from fire-related ecosystem services and minimize fire-related ecosystem services. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. There's a virtual applause.
Thank you.
And we have some time for questions. That was fascinating. Annie, if you want to forward questions, I'll start myself. I was struck by your comment about the sort of the embrace of prescribed fire being really strong in the Western Mediterranean and weaker to the east. Do you see that changing? Italy, Greece, Turkey, it's, you know, and larger, is that changing, or is that, do you think that's a much harder nut to crack?
Well, so far, I don't see it changing. Interestingly, the first prescribed fire experiments were in Greece in 1960 something. They were pioneers, but then they abandoned. I don't know what happened. They had this guy, Liaku, and he has this paper presented at the Tall Timbers Conference in 1973. I think it's one of the first. So, but they don't even carry out full treatments of other kinds there in Greece. Turkey is different. Maybe Turkey can be more supportive of prescribed burning in the future. They can. More than 19% of the land is public. So, and the Forest Service has a really huge budget compared with other European countries. So it's just a matter of policy. But I don't really know what will happen there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that I don't know this, and getting to a question. In Western North America, there's been a pretty long hesitation to embracing prescribed fire as a really, at least at the landscape level, and with use rates that match other places in North America, and the abundance of mortality causing wildfires and wildfires that have caused sort of indirect mortality through long duration smoke. And it was very compelling looking at those recent deadly fires in Southern Europe. Do you think that's changing attitudes, or what's your take on that?
Well, in Portugal, prescribed burning gained political support after the tragic fires in 2003, 2005, and more after 2017. So at least in Portugal, these very large fires and bad fire seasons, including people killed in 2017, gave more political will and more political support to the practice, including in terms of budget. So we now have much more budget for prescribed burning. Now what limits the practice is mostly manpower. We don't have enough people, not in sufficiently experienced and organized, because our public administration agencies, they don't have enough people with these skills, and usually prescribed burning is like it's like something they do on their spare time. So many people burn on the weekends or on holidays because they have the willingness and the enthusiasm to do so. But on their regular work day, they have other things to do. So it's really a problem to have a dedicated workforce, because the political direction is there, the budget is starting to be relevant, but we still need to develop the rest. Also, problems with land tenure, lots of private property, 95%, well, 92% of forest land is privately owned. So this creates, of course, problems for prescribed burning unless the forest owners have this fire culture like in the southeastern US, but they don't. So, and they don't even manage their land. It's the usual situation. So we have lots of barriers that should be overcome, that need to be overcome before the practice expands more.
Great. Well, I feel like that your last 2 minutes of that answer, or last minute and a half, was the best ad for the Florence conference next year. It's amazing how the stories are similar regardless of geography, and then also how geography creates these really novel situations that that deserve our attention. Thank you again, and really appreciate it. And that was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll transition to our closing keynote, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Lenya Quinn-Davidson. Lenya is a fire advisor with the University of California Cooperative Extension. She works on the north coast of California. Her primary focus is on the human connection with fire and increasing the use of prescribed fire for habitat restoration, invasive species control, ecosystem and community resiliency. She works on prescribed fire issues at various scales. She works locally in Humboldt County, where she works with private landowners to bring fire back as a land management tool. At the state level, where she collaborates on policy and research related to prescribed fire, and helps to inspire and support and focus leadership toward prescribed fire. And nationally, she's worked with leadership with the Prescribed Fire Training Exchanges, or the TREX movement, as well as serving on the Coalition of Prescribed Fire Councils board. We asked Lenya to give this closing keynote because we thought her enthusiasm and her passion would be infectious, and it's a lovely way to close. And with that, Lenya, take it away.
Thank you, Morgan. Let me just share my screen here. Yeah, well, it's such an honor to be here and do this closing plenary for the Congress this year. And I'm impressed that there are so many people still with us. I know it's kind of late in the conference and late in the day, especially for those of you on the East Coast. So as Morgan said, when he asked me to give this presentation, he said they wanted to finish the Congress with something inspiring. And I have to admit that when one of your biggest inspirations asks you to inspire them, it's a little intimidating. So we'll see how we do here. I've been thinking about this presentation for a couple months, and you know, I'll admit it's a little counterintuitive to look to a place like California for inspiration around fire. We're really in kind of a dark period in fire in California, and we're seeing patterns here that are unprecedented and that are scary, and there's a lot of fear and overwhelm around fire in California right now. You know, we have fires that are burning whole communities, fires that are growing 100,000 acres in a day, burning into urban areas, taking lots of lives. And so it's really a kind of a dark time, but it's also a really bright time. And I'd say that there is a parallel brightness and inspiration and momentum to the other things that are going on in California. I did want to share a couple photos. These are photos I took recently from my hometown in Trinity County, which is in Northern California, a very rural part of Northern California. And this summer, the Monument Fire was burning all around my town. And we were about one wind shift away from meeting the same fate that Greenville did, which earlier in the summer with the Dixie Fire. So, you know, these fire problems in California are very present for most people. This Monument Fire evacuated 90% of my county, the county I grew up in. I don't live there now, I live west of there. But, you know, people all across California, whether they're in urban areas or whether they're in rural areas, they're feeling the impacts of fire. And I think, you know, we're feeling the impacts of fire exclusion just as much as we are with the wildfires that are burning. So we're just really in a place where we need inspiration and things to change. And there are a lot of great things going on, especially around prescribed fire in California. And so with this presentation today, I want to share some of the really inspiring and amazing efforts that are happening in California across the state. And I also want to frame it with a little bit of a philosophical approach, because what I've come to realize in my years working on prescribed fire is that the most inspiring prescribed fire leaders all share some similar philosophy and approach, even if they've never articulated it. And this has really come to mind a lot for me recently. So that's what I'm going to do here with this talk. Now, a couple months ago, I was having lunch with a really good friend of mine, Dr. Sarah Ray. She's a professor at Humboldt State University, and she's an expert on climate anxiety. And we were talking about some of the policy work that I've been working on here in California and how we had some major wins. And I'm going to talk about that later in the presentation. But I was kind of sharing that with her. And, you know, these were things that we thought were fairly insurmountable about a year ago. And we were able to see those come to pass. And Sarah said to me, you know, the thing I love about you, Lenya, you seem to think that anything is possible. And it was funny because my husband had actually made the same comment about me just a couple days before that. And it's true, I really do. I think that anything is possible, especially when it involves people and people problems. And, you know, coming from Sarah, I knew this wasn't just a friendly compliment. This was actually a professional commentary on my style, my work style. Because in her work on climate anxiety, this idea that you could envision a future that's different from what you're dealing with, you know, in the present, this idea that you could affect change or that you could, you know, have anything be possible, it's actually a core tenet of her work on climate change and on climate anxiety. And so I highly recommend checking out this book that she published last year, A Field Guide to Climate Anxiety. It has a lot of really interesting insights. But so she, in the opening paragraphs of this book, she describes a moment where she's standing in front of her classroom of young college students, and she asks them to do a visualization exercise. She says, close your eyes and imagine a climate changed world where everything that you had worked on, all of the efforts you had put in in your careers around climate had come to pass, and you were actually thriving. And, you know, things were functional, and you're living in this better climate changed environment. And she asked her students to consider what that would look like, what that would feel like. And if people were thanking them for their contributions to that, what were they being thanked for? She thought this would be really great. You know, the students would have a great dialogue. They'd really get into a good discussion. They'd feel empowered. And instead it was crickets. Nothing, blank stares. The students all sat there wondering what she was talking about. And she realized as she dug in that they couldn't actually envision a climate changed future where they could thrive. They couldn't envision it. They actually just didn't even think it was possible. So this was a major red flag for her and ended up being the premise of this book that she wrote. And as you know, this really piqued my interest because I think in the work that we do in fire and in prescribed fire in particular, it's really important that we have this vision of what we're working toward. And even if it seems completely out in left field, it's such a core part of what we do. And it turns out that this is actually something that's been studied and discussed a lot, this idea of the radical imagination. So the ability to imagine the world, life, and social institutions, not as they are, but as they otherwise might be. This is something that's been really core to social and political movements throughout time. And so as I started reading more about this, I thought it was so fascinating because I really see the work that we're doing around prescribed fire here in California and in other parts of the country and the world as a social movement. And that radical imagination, that ability for us to think that anything is possible or to affect the change that we need to see is so important to our work. So with this presentation, I'm going to frame the California prescribed fire movement in this light of the radical imagination. And I really love this tweet. This is my colleague Susie Coker posted this a couple of weeks ago when she was hosting a workshop. And you know, in the state of California right now, we have this goal that's been set out by the federal agencies and the state that they're going to treat 1 million acres a year by a certain date. So this person at her workshop said, how do you prescribe burn 1 million acres in California with 1 million landowners? And I just love this so much. And I think it really speaks to this vision that I also share. You know, when I close my eyes and think about what I want the future of prescribed fire to look like in California, it does involve people being empowered to use fire on their land. And that flies in the face of what we've seen over the last several decades in California, where really it was only the fire management agencies who are using prescribed fire. And cultural practitioners and landowners and community members have largely been left out. So I just love this vision of you know, everyone using prescribed fire on different scales and in different habitat types and throughout the year. And that's how we get to scale. I love that. I also sat on a panel discussion recently with Elizabeth Azus, who you see on the left-hand side here. She's a Yurok woman who lives a couple hours from where I am. She's out on the Klamath River. And she's one of the founders of the Cultural Fire Management Council. And she's also a basket weaver. And we were on a panel for the California Indian Basket Weavers Association. And they asked Elizabeth to describe her future vision for prescribed fire, for cultural burning, for basket weaving. And she said, you know, I want a future where when a basket weaver knows it's the right day to burn, they can get out there and use fire and they don't have to go through a stack of paperwork and a bunch of bureaucracy to do it. That is their tool and they can use it. And I love that vision. And I think that's something we can achieve. It might seem like a simple vision, but really it's not. I mean, we've had a lot of issues with tribal sovereignty and people being able to use fire in the ways that their tradition dictates, but being stalled by all the rules and the fire management agencies that kind of own prescribed fire and cultural burning right now. And lastly, I wanted to share along these lines of the vision. I wrote a blog last year actually, that kind of touched on Sarah's book and on some of the themes in this presentation. And my dear friend Will Harling wrote the most beautiful poem in response to that blog and the comments. And I was trying to think of how to cut it shorter, but I just love it so much. This is only part of it, but I wanted to read it. So you can either read along or you can just close your eyes and listen. But I think it's so perfect to describe this future vision. So in 10 years, Californians will think about fire like Floridians. Prescribed fire will still be more fun, but about as stressful as mowing the lawn. 10 years from now, or perhaps 100, we will learn to live with fire because the lessons will keep coming. Eventually, every one of us will have lost a piece of what we love, and we will choose the uncertainty of embracing fire, even while it burns us. In 10 years, creeks that have been dry for decades will flow again. Salmon will turn gravels that have long been out of reach. The fruits of the land will be sweeter, the deer and elk fatter. We will remember what it means to be stewards of place, to give back what is owed to the land that feeds us. So you see him describing this future vision, that radical imagination. I love that. So the radical imagination is also about drawing on the past and trying to understand what happened in the past and then bring that forward into the future. And of course, in prescribed fire, that's a huge part of what we do. You know, we think here in California, we're really trying to center our work on indigenous burning and on the history, the local and traditional knowledge around the use of fire. And we've had some really amazing partnerships and coalitions building around that in our work that we've been doing the last couple of years. This year with the policy work we were doing, we saw a very unusual partnership between the Karuk tribe, the California Cattlemen's Association, and Defenders of Wildlife, who were all coming out together in support of the policy work we were doing around prescribed fire and cultural burning. And that is such an unusual group of people to get together. We were having these planning meetings to talk about this press release we were putting forward, and everyone was just laughing. It's like nothing like prescribed fire can bring people together who come from such unique and different backgrounds. But the indigenous communities and the ranching community and the environmental community, we all have a shared stake in seeing fire reclaim its place on the land. And we see that in some of the work that came out of this Karuk Good Fire Report. I highly recommend checking this out. It's one of the best summaries of some of the challenges to prescribed fire, but also the opportunities, and especially for cultural and indigenous burning. And we were able to use this report. A group of us put this together with the Karuk tribe. We were also able to use it to inform this statewide strategic prescribed fire plan that was mandated by the governor's task force. And I have to say that this plan is so beautifully written because it came directly from the prescribed fire practitioner community. And we see on the front page there, that's a woman named Asia Conrad, who's a Karuk woman, who's part of the prescribed fire community in the Klamath. So we're just really seeing the shift, and we're being able to center on local and traditional knowledge around prescribed fire. And that's so important. So the radical imagination is not just about dreaming of a different future, but it's about bringing that back to work on the present and to inspire action and solidarity. So you heard me talking a little bit about some of the unusual solidarity that we're seeing around prescribed fire. But now I want to share a little bit of the work of California's prescribed fire movement, because there's so much happening. And just for some context, in 2009, Morgan and I and a couple others founded the Northern California Prescribed Fire Council. That was in 2009. That was the first prescribed fire council in the Western US. It was a big moment for California. No one knew what in the world that was. There had never been a venue for the prescribed fire community to convene and work on issues together. In 2013, we hosted the first training exchange, the first TREX event in California. That again was this kind of watershed moment because we had never seen cooperative burning like that in California. We had never had an event where federal folks and state folks and private and tribal were all training and burning together. Huge moment for California and for the West. And then in 2017, 2018, we saw the formation of the first California Prescribed Burn Association. That was here in Humboldt County. And we have seen just monumental growth around that idea of community-based prescribed fire in California. So, from 2009 until now, that's not a very long time. And we have just seen exponential growth in the interest and momentum around prescribed fire. It's truly remarkable. So this map shows all of prescribed burn associations around the state of California that are in various stages of development. This map's actually missing a few. We've had like 2 new ones form in the last month. It's just growing like crazy. It's really, really wonderful. And there are some people that have been really pivotal to the statewide growth. So you see me and my colleague Jeff there on the right-hand side. And we've basically spent the last 5 years traveling around California and spreading the good word of the Prescribed Burn Association. We're kind of evangelical in it. And then on the left, we have Aaron Banwell and Miller Bailey and their son Alder, who are also doing that same kind of thing. So they're going around the state and leading trainings and empowering people and just really bringing this light to all of these efforts around the state. So we're so lucky to have these really incredible people advancing this vision of prescribed fire in California. We also have these really kind of unique and local efforts that are going on. So I'm going to take you on a little tour around California. The first thing is the Cultural Fire Management Council. So this is a group, Elizabeth, who I talked about earlier, another woman, Margot Robbins, and their local partners. They've formed this council to really try to bring back fire as a tool for the Yurok people and on their ancestral lands. So they host TREX events, and they also facilitate family burning, where they're getting families out and trying to restore that connection and those skills so that people can use fire again on the Yurok ancestral lands. We also have the Klamath TREX, which is just right up the river from those guys. And the Klamath TREX, they started hosting a TREX in 2014, right after we did the first NorCal TREX. And they have evolved this into this incredible program. This year, they had 170 people apply. And so instead of doing their traditional 2-week program, they decided just to stretch it out over 6 weeks. And they trained all 170 people who applied. You can see the breadth of those backgrounds that people were coming from. And this was not an easy path that these folks took. It's taken a lot of time to build those partnerships and that trust and to work with the Forest Service in their area. This year, they treated 867 acres with prescribed fire and pile burning, and a lot of that was on national forest land. And they really have this vision with the Klamath Treks of a local workforce, of being able to protect their communities. They're totally surrounded by national forests, so they can use prescribed fire around the communities to better facilitate fire having a larger role on the bigger landscape around them. And then there are places like Butte County and Plumas over on the east side where they're using a mix of Treks and prescribed burn associations to train and empower people. So they have this great local on-call workforce, and they've trained hundreds of people just in the last 2 years. And I love this picture on the left. It's just actually from last week. That's Hannah Hepner, who's one of the leads on the Plumas Underburn Cooperative, and her 3 triplets. And they were the holding crew on a prescribed burn last week. And it was just so great to see these, to see that family burning coming back to California. It's been gone for so long. Now, Fire Forward is in the North Bay. So this is Sonoma County, Napa County, Marin, that area. And they're doing some really incredible things. They have a prescribed burn association style group, the Good Fire Alliance, that has 442 members who are training and implementing burns together. They also have 300 community members who have basic NWCG qualifications. And they've been able to take a subset of those folks and actually build an on-call fire crew that responds to wildfires. It's truly, pretty incredible work that they're doing there. They also have a Fire Fellows program where they're trying to steer, kind of take these really special people and advance them in their work on prescribed fire. So the Fire Forward program there is, and that's under the guidance of Sasha Berleman and Brian Peterson. And then the last thing I want to bring up is California's Central Coast. So down in Santa Barbara area, San Luis Obispo, they are really revitalizing these old range improvement associations. So these are rancher-led groups that are getting together and burning on rangelands. And they have a long history in California, but they went dormant for a long time. And so the rise of prescribed burn associations kind of enabled this revitalization of the range improvement associations. And they're doing really great things. And we're seeing a lot of growth in the prescribed fire work in the Central Coast. Now, all of this is better facilitated with some policy changes. And this is something that I've been working on a lot in the last couple of years. We have now a state certified burn boss program. We also just set aside $20 million for a prescribed fire claims fund in the state of California, so a state-backed insurance fund for prescribed fire. And we also changed our liability law to a gross negligence standard. These are all things that are going to better facilitate this vision of people all over the state who don't work for fire management agencies, being able to lead burning and have the protections and the insurance and the comfort that they need to do that. And so this is all, this really speaks to kind of my radical vision for prescribed fire. And really it is a bit radical and it's very uncomfortable. And this, we're dealing with some tension and discomfort in California around these ideas of who gets to be an expert, who gets to use fire, what does that look like? And we're having really interesting dialogue around that, but we're pushing this forward. And I was so heartened that these things passed. We would have never thought that California would change its negligence standard, and we did. So we had some great wins. We also did some policy work around cultural burning and tribal sovereignty. So one of the really cool things that happened this year is in the bill that changed our liability law, we were able to recognize cultural practitioners as having the same kind of clout as a certified burn boss. And so that's the first time in our state law that we're really recognizing cultural practitioners in that way. And it's so important for protecting their sovereignty around fire. And there's a lot more work to do there, but I think we're all really proud that we were able to get that in there. So these are the faces of California's prescribed fire movement. And I hope with this presentation that I'm showing that we all share this vision. These people in these photos, these are friends. These are people who call on each other and who have learned from each other, and they go burn with each other. And they have a shared vision for a different future for California. And we don't let things get in our way. We don't think, oh, it's not going to happen, or we can't change the liability law. I had people telling me that that bill would never pass and that it wasn't even worth my time to work on it. And I and the people in these photos, we said, that's not true. We can do it because we have so much momentum and such diversity behind this movement that we can make things happen. And we can envision things that are radically different than they are now. You know, we can envision a future where cultural practitioners do not have to get permits. We can envision a future where landowners around the state and community members have the skill and the comfort and the confidence that they need to use fire on their lands. We can envision a future where NEPA and CEQA recognize intact fire regimes as the default condition and require that you justify fire exclusion. We can picture that. We can picture a space where federal land managers feel really supported in doing bold, innovative projects, and they actually feel like their agency has their back. We can envision that future. And we can envision a future where fire management agencies don't own prescribed fire anymore, and everyone has a role and a right to use fire as a tool. So those are things that we can envision and we can make happen. And we're already talking about how to do that in the next legislative session, in the next year, and in the next 5 years and 10 years. We're working toward that radical vision for the future. Yesterday, I was driving through Chico and I decided to stop by and see my friend Don Hankins, who I think was the opening plenary for this conference. And I stopped in and Don and I both like to do art. So we were going to trade some of our block prints and chat about fire and some of the policy work we're doing. But it turned out it was a good burn day. So Don was out burning and I met him out on the fire line. And then who comes hiking up the hill but Jim Wills, one of my favorite burn bosses who I've hosted Trex events with for more than a decade. He's involved with the Prescribed Fire Council. And then we're driving down the road and there's Zeke Lunder, who's another one of my fire friends who is a GIS guy and did GIS on Trex events for years. You all might be familiar with his website, The Lookout, that he started this year during the Dixie Fire. He's a super inspiring guy. And then I had another friend, John Dvorak, hike out of the burn unit, and he was there from Plumas County burning with these guys. And it was just so neat to see all of these different people from different parts of my life. And they were there on the fire line together burning because of this prescribed fire movement. It brings people together. And I honestly thought driving away, there is nothing that this group of people in California can't do. I really think anything is possible with this group that we have working on these issues here. So with that, I just want to say, I hope that next time you're lying awake at night, 4 a.m, like I do most nights, tap into that radical imagination. Think about what it is that you see for the future. What is it, if you had no boundaries, what would the future with fire look like in your place? And how are you going to make that happen? And what would it look and feel like if everything you've been working on came to pass? And then, the next time I see you or the next time you send me an email, tell me in that changed fire future, what are people thanking you for? Because I know there's something. So thank you so much for your time. And Morgan, I'll hand it back to you.
As promised, that was phenomenal. That was so good. Annie, start popping me questions. It looks like we already have a couple. I appreciate the passion that you have. Sorry. Why do you get the crier to do this? Note to self. All right. Anyway, that passion, it really speaks to, in the United States, for most policies, people look to California. And with prescribed fire, it's always been the opposite. Whatever California's doing, do the opposite. So I just thank you for all of your tireless efforts. Okay. Anyway, I think, we had hoped that we would close and have this inspiring close. And I think that, as we think about where AFE is going, internationalizing, sometimes it's really helpful to there is the think global and act local. And I feel like what you've talked about is a perfect example of that. And I challenge everyone in attendance today to do the same, to not throw their hands up and or wring their hands with all the challenges they're facing, but to really take charge and realize your own future. What Annie's message to me, like I said, no questions, just lots of accolades and beautiful comments. So if I could see them, I would transfer them to you, but I can't. they're all saying super inspiring. So thank you, Lenya. Really appreciate it. And thanks so much.
Thanks, Morgan.
Okay, as we wrap up and I get myself back together here, I want to say three things before we close. One is, as many of you saw who contributed talks to this great Congress, the Journal of Fire Ecology will be having a special collection that results from the Congress. For those who said they were interested from their talks or posters, Annie has that list, and I'll be sending out a message to you next week in case you thought this was over. It will never be over. I also wanted to make another plug for the Florence conference. Cue slide. Perfect, Tanya. That will be next fall in Florence, Italy. Like Chris mentioned, this has been delayed, and we're all hopeful that in October of 2022, the world is in a much different situation with COVID, and that we laugh, that we look back to the COVID years. And then in closing, I'll say I want to thank the Dream Team for being really, really great. And most importantly, Annie, thank you. Really great. So thank you all, and see you later.